Welcome back, Music Maniacs, to another episode of Gibbs Drops the Needle, your one-stop spot for all things music. I'm Gibbs. It's Saturday, so we're going to get into your weekly Hot 100 from Billboard and your top 200 albums. We'll do the top 10 of each. So starting off with the Hot 100, which is for the singles. At number 10, we have Dracula by Tame Impala and Jenny. Last week, this track was also at number 10, so it's holding steady there, and it's been on this list for 37 weeks now. At number 9, we have I Can't Love You Anymore with Ella Langley and Morgan Wallen. Last week, this was number 9. It's peaked at number 7, and it's been on this list for 7 weeks now. Up next at number 8, we have So Easy to Fall in Love by Olivia Dean. Last week this track was at number 7, so it went down just a little bit. It peaked all the way up at number 5 and has been on the Hot 100 for 37 weeks now. At number 7, we have Man I Need by Olivia Dean. Last week this was number 6, so this one also fallen down just a tad bit. It peaked all the way up at number 2 and has been on the Hot 100 for 42 weeks. Up at number 6, we have I Just Might by Bruno Mars. Last week this was number 5, so it took just a little bit of a dip. It peaked all the way up at number 1 and has been on this list for 22 weeks now. At 5, we have Hate That I Made You Love Me by Ariana Grande. Last week, this was the number 1 song of the week, so that is where it has peaked at number 1 and has been on this list for 2 weeks now, so it taking quite a bit of a drop after debuting at that top spot. At number 4, we have Be Her by Ella Langley, which last week was also at number 4. It's peaked all the way up at number 2 and been on the Hot 100 for 17 weeks now. At number 3, we have Janice STFU, which last week was still at number 3. It debuted at number 1 and has been on the charts for 4 weeks now. Holding your spot at number 2, I feel like this is the 3rd week at least it's been at the number 2 spot. We have Choosin' Texas by Ella Langley. It has peaked at number 1 and been on the Hot 100 for 34 weeks now. And your new song that was released, and your new number 1 for this week, which I did go over when it released and said that it would probably make an impact on this chart, was I Knew It, I Knew You by Taylor Swift. Obviously at number 1, that's where it's peaked, and it's been on this list for 1 week now. So, no surprise there. Taylor Swift releases something new, it's probably going to make its way up to that number 1 spot. She has a lot of fans, she's a very good artist, she spans multiple genres, and it's no surprise that she made it up to that number 1 spot, and I think I might have even went through that when the single initially released, and we went through and talked about new releases for that week and saying that it being a Taylor Swift song, it was probably going to make an impact on this chart. So debuting at number 1. So now getting into the top 200 albums and going through the top 10 albums of this week. At number 10, we have The Art of Loving by Olivia Dean. Last week, this album was number 14. It is peaked at number 3, and it has been on this list for 37 weeks. At number 9, we have One Thing at a Time by Morgan Wallen. Last week, this album was up at number 8. It is peaked at number 1 and has been on the Billboard 200 for 171 weeks. At number 8, we have Number Ones by Michael Jackson. This is his greatest hits album. Last week it was number 7. It's peaked at number 6 and been on the Billboard 200 for 241 weeks. I was just talking to my wife last night actually about how it's amazing how Michael Jackson is still a very relevant artist with younger kids now. We went to my daughter's t-ball game, and the other ball field had older kids on it, and they like to do their announcements and their walk-up songs when they get ready to go bat. And we heard one of the kids had chose Beat It by Michael Jackson, and that's when I turned to her, because I've been doing this for a few weeks now, and I said, I'm amazed that his albums are making a resurgence and kids are seeming to really get into his music still. So it's kind of cool to see the younger generation still getting into the older generation's music. I know I, for one, am one that I love the period of 70s music, so I was always, at that time, I was a younger kid who got into my parents' music more so than what was going on. So it's kind of cool to see nowadays that is still trending, with these younger kids making Michael Jackson still appear in the top 10 of the Billboard 200. Moving on, at number 7, we have a new album to hit this list. It is Dinner Party by Niall Horan. I think that we went over that on a new release when it came out, so it might finally be making an impact. I wasn't sure, when you bring up these new albums coming out and new singles, I wasn't sure if that would be an immediate impact situation, but I guess when you look at it, that only gives it one day to really make an impact. So what we're seeing now is more of a 1 week delay before they actually make an impact on these lists. So Dinner Party being another one of those that I believe we went over. Being new to the Billboard 200, its peak position is obviously going to be number 7, and it's been on this list for 1 week now. Up next, we have another Michael Jackson album, and it is Thriller. It's held in the top 10 for at least while I've been going through these with you guys, and it's peaked all the way up at number 1. Last week it was holding the 6th spot, and it's been on this list for 722 weeks, which I know I've been saying for weeks now, that 700 and some weeks, and it took me till this week to finally do the math on it, and it's almost 14 years that this album has made an impact and been on the Billboard 200. So that's just an outstanding amount of time, and really goes to show what a great album it is, holding a spot for almost 14 years. Moving on to number 5, we have Do That Again by Malcolm Todd. It is a new one on the list, so obviously it's peaked at number 5 and been on this list for 1 week. Next up, we have The Great Divide by Noah Kahan. Last week this was number 4, so it's still holding the number 4 spot steady. It peaked at number 1 and has been on the Billboard 200 for 7 weeks. At number 3, we have I'm the Problem by Morgan Wallen. Last week, this was also number 3, so it's holding steady as well. It peaked up at number 1 and has been on the Billboard 200 for 56 weeks. At number 2, we have Dandelion by Ella Langley. Last week, this was also number 2, so it seems like the, top 4 is holding its spot so far. Dandelion has peaked at number 1 and been on the Billboard 200 for 9 weeks now. And number 1, still number 1. So the top 4 all staying the same from last week at least. And your number 1 album since it's debuted is Iceman by Drake. Last week, again, it's been holding that spot, number 1. And it's been on the list for 4 weeks now, and I believe it's held that number 1 spot for all 4 weeks. So definitely going to take something big, I think, to knock Drake out of that number 1 spot for right now. We'll have to see if anything next week can do the job. So one thing I wanted to bring up in just the time that I've been doing these top tens for the week is I've kind of noticed when it comes to singles, you get a lot of newer artists, which isn't really surprising. And when it comes to the albums, if you scroll through the whole list, you're getting a lot more of what would be considered older artists and older albums holding these Billboard 200 spots. So maybe the singles themselves aren't making a popular impact. And that's not saying that no older artists are in the Hot 100, because there are sprinkled throughout some older artists, but I'd noticed that they make more of their statement on the Billboard 200. And the flip side to that is that you have a lot of newer artists releasing really impactful, great singles, but you're not seeing the newer artists necessarily on the Billboard 200 side of things. And again, that's not saying that it doesn't happen, because obviously you have Drake's album that came out and made a big impact, and you have Noah Kahan, Ella Langley. You have these artists that are just releasing these new albums and they're becoming relevant. But I noticed you can go through these 200 lists and you can see Fleetwood Mac, and we talked about Michael Jackson, and just these older artists make more of an impact in the album range. And even going back as early 2000s artists, you still get some of their albums making impacts on this Billboard 200 list. And it just makes me raise the question, and it's not really even a question as it is a observation, that the emphasis nowadays is more put on the single and less put on the album. I feel like you have, especially back in the 70s and stuff, you had a lot of conceptual albums that take my favorite band, for example, so it's an easy example to make, is Pink Floyd. They were a band that they weren't all about the single. Yeah, they had popular songs from these albums, but they made these albums that were meant to be listened to from start to finish, and it went more into the process of making a not just great single, but a great album. And I just wonder if more artists nowadays are just getting away from that and not worrying about making 12 tracks or so that are good enough to be on an album, and just worrying about making that number one single, because we definitely live in a time where it's easy, if you write a good song, it's easy to go viral now. That's the big ticket for some of these artists of getting discovered and getting popular and getting their paydays, is you get a song maybe by a smaller artist that wasn't well known, but it's a catchy song, and suddenly it becomes a TikTok trend or a new dance or something along those lines that make it go viral, and that song blows up, which is great for that artist, great whenever someone has that kind of success. But necessarily they're not writing a full good album in the process. So maybe they wrote that one song that goes viral, but they're not writing full-length albums anymore. And I feel like that's scary to me, because I'm someone who likes to sit down and listen to a full album. I've listened to some newer albums that came out recently. We went through, I think I mentioned I had listened to The Great Divide. I have recently listened to Evanescence's new album. I'm probably going to sit down. I've heard someone say something about Sublime's new album being good, so I wanted to sit down and do that as well. And I might start putting some reviews up of these albums, since I'm going through and listening to the whole album. But I just wanted to kind of state what I've noticed in these Hot 100, Billboard 200 kind of comparison, with the singles being more so dominated by artists that are just writing a good single, and the Billboard 200 maybe being more dominated by people that are older. And I mean, you even look at Drake. Drake's been around for a while. So, yes, it's a new album, but he still probably comes from the mindset of making a full, complete, good album. And you still have artists that started in maybe an earlier era that care about making full, good albums. I know we bring up Taylor Swift. She's obviously, her albums are going to be good, and she does. I've listened to full Taylor Swift albums when I was doing the top 500 greatest albums of all time podcast, and so I've listened to them and they're great. But I just wonder if nowadays that's becoming a rare art to focus and make a full great album. So sorry for the little tangent there about going on about those kind of things, but it was just something that I've been noticing since I've started doing these lists, and I just thought it was interesting and wanted to share my thoughts about it. I would love to know your thoughts on it. Comment below or leave a message for me somewhere and let me know what you think. Are artists steering away from making great albums and just focusing on that viral song, or do you think that artists are still putting the thought and time into making a good album? So talking about comparing these Hot 100 artists to the Billboard 200 artists, there is a lot of crossover throughout the years. So I was able to find an article that Billboard had put out themselves, and it listed the artists that have had the most combined number ones on both lists. So this is, they've had number one albums and number one singles. So these are the artists that throughout the years have made an impact on both lists and impacted them the most. So number one for the most combined Hot 100 and Billboard 200 number one spots is really no surprise here, because they're one of the biggest bands of all time, and it's the Beatles. And they have combined on this list for 39 number one spots, with 20 of those number ones being on the Hot 100 list and 19 number ones on the Billboard 200 list. The Beatles first topped these charts in February of 1964 with I Want to Hold Your Hand and the album Meet the Beatles, with the band's run of the Billboard 200 number one stretching through 2000-2001. Holding the next spot and the highest spot by a solo artist is no surprise here either with Taylor Swift. She has 30 number ones, 15 each on Billboard 200 and Hot 100, with the latest of those being the Life of a Showgirl album and I Knew It, I Knew You, which just is number one this week, as we talked about earlier. Swift is the only woman and joined the Beatles and Drake among all acts with double-digit number ones on both rankings. So this is someone who has a very good chance of, by the time she retires from music, possibly beating out the Beatles here. She's only 9 away, and she's maybe midway through her career. I mean, she's not super old. I don't know how long she wants to write and make music or perform for people, but assuming that she does it, well into her later years, she's probably on track to take this number one spot eventually, just because, as I stated earlier, she has such a loyal fan base and she has good music. It's not that she hasn't earned what she's gotten. I'm not just alluding to the fact that she has a loyal fan base, so that's why she gets this. She writes good music. She writes catchy songs. So I see her eventually knocking the Beatles off of their number one spot. Following Taylor Swift, we have someone who's holding a number one spot right now with Drake. He has a 29 combined Billboard 200 with 15 and 14 Hot 100 number ones. Most recently, he's made this list, and we've talked about, with Iceman and Janice STFU. This is another artist that I feel like is fairly early on in his career, midway through maybe, again, depending on how long he wants to do this. But he has a chance of possibly creeping up. I mean, he's only 10 away from the Beatles at this point. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that he would be able to have some more number one singles and possibly number one albums to add to his already combined 29. Next up, we have Mariah Carey at the number 4 spot here with a combined 25 number ones on the chart. She has 19 Hot 100 number ones, which is the leader of all of the solo artists with the most number ones on the Hot 100. And she has 6 on the Billboard 200. So definitely an artist here who has gotten the majority of hers off of singles and less of albums. And unfortunately for her, she's probably going to stay right around that spot. I don't know if she even makes music anymore, but she's at number 4 right now. Rounding out the top 5, we have Madonna, who has earned 21 number ones over her career with 12 Hot 100 singles and 9 Billboard 200 albums. So that's your top 5 with the most combined number ones. And the breakdown of that, the rest of the top 10 or so, there's a lot of tying in here. We have 19 with Michael Jackson, 18 combined with Jay-Z, 17 with Janet Jackson, 17 with Paul McCartney and Wings, 17 with Elvis Presley, 17 with the Rolling Stones. So that's the rest of the top 10. So you have some tying in there that obviously I think that was maybe 11, but you have many artists tied at number 17, which will probably remain tied because I don't believe any of those artists are making music anymore, and most of them aren't even alive anymore. You have Janet Jackson, who probably doesn't make music anymore. You have Paul McCartney, who honestly, he just, I think, released a new album not long ago, so he could possibly end up working his way up to 18. We'll have to see. Elvis Presley, obviously not alive anymore, staying at 17. The Rolling Stones probably staying at 17, though I did hear Keith Richards said something about Mick Jagger's always writing new music, so who knows if we end up getting a new Rolling Stone record down the road or not. Nothing's been officially said, but I just saw a brief headline of an article that said Keith Richards said Mick Jagger's still writing music. So those round out the rest of the top 10 there. So there's only maybe a couple artists in there that could still maybe make an impact on that. Paul McCartney, though, it doesn't really count towards this as much because the Beatles were obviously a separate group, and then he had Wings, and then he had his solo stuff. So it doesn't all count as one for him, but he, as an artist, including all of his work with the Beatles and everything, he accounts for 56 combined Billboard 200 and Hot 100 number ones, with the before mentioned 39 with the Beatles, and when I just added the 17 more with his solo and his output with Wings. So 56 combined number one albums and singles for Paul McCartney, who is probably one of the best songwriters of all time. So not really big surprise there that he would be responsible for so many number ones. It's amazing I don't know if any of you have watched Get Back. I haven't finished it, but it's so fun to sit there and just watch him in the recording studio, and he rips off a song like, say, Let It Be, and you just sitting here now know what kind of iconic song that is, but to him at the time it's just I came up with this little thing. And it's just great to see his writing process, and he obviously is such a great writer with having so many number ones combined on these lists. I did have one more thing that I wanted to add to the end of this. It's not really related to top Billboard artist, but it is related to awards, as the Grammys did announce that there are going to be 5 new categories for next year's Grammys. So that's great. Anytime more artists can get recognition for the work they've done, that's awesome. So the 5 categories that the Grammys will now be awarding next year are Best Asian Pop Music Performance, which is probably because of the big boom of K-pop. I mean, that's such a big up and coming genre now, that which obviously the Grammys are going to have to take notice on that. Another thing that is kind of obvious that they got to take notice on is Best Latin Song, is another new category that they are adding to next year's Grammys, which just makes tons of sense because you have artists like Bad Bunny and Daddy Yankee, and I know there's tons other out there that I'm missing. Those are just the 2 that popped right off the top of my head. And it's great that they're getting the recognition because they are such prominent worldwide artists, that it's great to see the Grammys opening up to not just what is necessarily popular here in the US, but what is popular on a global stage. Not saying that Latin music isn't popular in the US, because obviously it is, with Bad Bunny just doing the Super Bowl halftime show, really showing the broad audience that he had, and he was really everywhere there for a few months, it seemed like. So it's great to see the Grammys opening up to those genres of music. We're also going to see Best R&B Collaboration or a duo/group performance, which honestly I'm surprised that hadn't been a reward already. So it's finally time that R&B collaboration and duo group performance gets an award. Next we have Best Traditional Pop Vocal Performance, which I'm kind of wondering if this is like a Noah Khan kind of award. Would that be considered traditional pop? I'm not really sure if it means folky kind of music in that realm. So we'll have to wait and see, I guess, the nominees and what they consider as a traditional pop vocal performance. And lastly, we're going to have Best Traditional Folk Album, which again, same as the traditional pop vocal, we'll have to wait and see exactly what their classification is going to be for traditional folk album. So I just wanted to add that into the end of these, because we go through a lot of these hot Billboard 100s and Billboard 200s are probably going to be on the next round of the Grammys. So I kind of thought it important to maybe tie in possible awards that we could see some of these singles and albums winning next year. So I know this got kind of lengthy for a just going over the chart, but I appreciate y'all sticking around. If you could do me a favor, like, subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do there. Drop comments on what you're thinking about the podcast or show so far, and let me know anything that I could be doing better for you and make you more engaged and interested. Until next time, I'm Gibbs. This is Gibbs Drops the Needle. Stay safe and be kind.